Now, why was I interested in this confrontation of dice? In the fantasy trip, it's all target numbers. So you don't have opposed rolls. Opposed rolls are, in procedure, a little more clunky. I mean, they take more time. You got to handle both rolls. So why do I have why do I have that? And here's where I'm not thinking not about, the themes that we will get to eventually. It's what do I want the chaos to look like? And I need it to be composed of effort-filled confrontation. That's why you roll against, a recalcitrant chair in Sorcerer. The fucking chair is in your way. Got to deal with this chair. Well, why don't I just roll my strength and see how many successes? No, fuck all that. No. You're confronting the chair. The chair is confronting you. It's in your way. It's doing a thing because it exists. That confrontation is what every role in Sorcerer is about. That's the kind of chaos I want, of which the confrontation between demon and sorcerer, or sorcerer and sorcerer, or sorcerer and ordinary person, as it turns out in a lot of cases. That's the key quality that I want active as a contributor to the chaos. So that's why, and that's how. Now, how did I arrive at that? As you can see, it's historical. I had certain games on my mind. I had certain play experiences on my mind. I was in a particular historical and personal circumstance. And that's why I think embracing game design has two requirements. Requirement number one, you're playing. And maybe you have an idea for the game or something like that first, but you're going to hit the ground and you're going to play something. Even if all you have is an image and what if the dice, what if I do this with that? Sit down with somebody and actually freaking do it. Do not sit down by yourself and model it. No, you got to hit the table with somebody and they say, oh, you're working on a game. How do we play? And well, you do this and that. And they go, okay, well then, and you're like, there is no then. That's what I got. Thanks, and keep going. Some kind of play, or something far more sophisticated where you are really reflecting on the last 87 sessions of this game that you've been playing, and something's eating at you about it. Or in my case, the trajectories of several different play experiences that I'm looking at. Don't forget, when I first wrote Sorcerer, I was planning on using the Altarsorian interlock system, which was what they use for Cyberpunk. And I tried it, and I said, this isn't it. I have to do something different. A play-derived urge. So taking your personal circumstances where you are as a person, where role-playing is right now, as you've experienced it, and recognizing that this is an urge, right? I mean, normal people don't do this. Why should they? I mean, why don't they would just do it at the table, right? And have fun and tweak their games and maybe not even know they're doing it, and their role-playing becomes more fun. That's what, anyone of sense would do. Saying, I'm going to design a game. Well, yeah, okay. Some people wake up in the morning and say they want to, take over a neighboring country. So, I guess it's not. Guess it's good that it's not that. But that's the only good thing I have to say about this urge. But we have it. We're doomed. All right. So, anyway, the deal is that was the case for Sorcerer. Now, I tended to do that. I tended to have some idea blazing in my mind. In the case of Trollbabe, gender issues and gender aspects of rules, both for content and for players. I'm writing sex and sorcery after all, right? And I'm really focusing on that. And I'm also doing my best at that time to really try to recapture the aesthetics that I felt were me. Right, I'm really trying to flinze out habitual pop culture And I found myself really, of course, drawn and expressed, feeling very confirmed and excited and comfortable, in certain things, one of which is a particular kind of comics. So I'm going through this, and I'd already thought about a particular kind of dice rolling, which really, comes from zero in terms of over and under a number, but I wasn't thinking in dice pools as and curves like zero was. I was trying to say, let's keep this really more decision based, next to next based, and thinking about risk and stuff. I really wanted to get to very intuitive things. And it came together. The imagery for Troll Babe and the idea of messing with these dice, over and under things and pushing your luck and stuff like that, that all came together in a in a brief moment. I know I've told this before. I actually literally woke up in the night and said, Troll Babe, out of the blue. It's not magic, though. I'm in a particular place. I'm in a particular time. I have a particular history. Things are happening that I am deliberately thinking about, that I'm fascinated by. And I have this problem of expressing it in terms of game design. And again, though, it's nothing until I hit the table and start saying, let's try this. Unlike a lot of the times when you are really embedded in a matrix of active play and the changes are easily understood as messing with what you're already doing on an ongoing basis, this is a little more lateral. This is where I'm going, and let's do this, right? Kind of out of almost nothing, but it's not out of nothing because I have been playing huge amounts of games. I played The Dying Earth, which does have this sequential rolling thing in it. And I had played tons of Zero with different groups and was checking this out. We just played Amber. And again, I said, I see why I'm not doing that now. So there's all sorts of things which are caroming around, not to mention the very, very heavily gender-oriented play that I'm totally embedded in for several different groups that's going into writing Sex and Sorcery. So all that's happening. It's not as lateral as it looks. No, the muse did not visit me. It only felt like it, but they did. Then, we go to one last example, which is probably as far toward that end of kind of idea first as I've ever been, which is in the writing of the 4 Little Religion games. The first 3 in 2010 through 2012, and the 4th a few years later. I'll take a look at the first one, Estimated Profit. The Red Game, as some call it. I know, Ibars, you have a copy of this. They're available for free. I've talked about them before here in these questions. But how did this come about? And this is actually a question people ask me specifically about this game. They're like, what the fuck? Yeah, well, welcome to my world. Okay, so let's cast back a bit to a point of recognizing my sense of, if disillusion is the right word, confirmation perhaps. A number of other words come to mind regarding specific people's behaviors. But the recognition, I knew the Forge was finite. I'd always known the Forge was finite. I always knew that it would be time to close. I'd announced that it would be, and that was no surprise. And it was taking a little longer, just because of inertia. But the closure, is happening. That's not disillusion. I'm like, any day now, please. But, just finish this and then done. But the sense of what everyone else was doing and saying and feeling about that, and what had happened since 2008 regarding the finances of being an independent role-playing publisher. All of this is, weighing on me. I'm feeling very, in 2010, really disconnected from anything but highly personal interactions. Pretty much of the opinion that the industry is of no meaningful interest to anyone. So at this point, I'm jumping away from familiar design. I'm saying to myself, oh, and also remember at this point I've done Spione and Shahida. If you want the sort of pure confirmation that we can do anything, we are not bound by anything in terms of what has been done. For whatever reason, I felt like leaping into the dark. For whatever reason, I said, let's go with pure inspiration. Let's go with pure idea. Let's not rely on role-playing as we know it. Now, I couldn't get away from that entirely. There are echoes of Polaris. There are echoes of other things. I cite Keith Sankowski's Unnamed Game. You can see all these influences. I'm very explicit about these in the indicia for estimated profit. So you can look at those. Those are the things that I had played and which are kind of bubbling around. So there's no question that that's going on. But I was not in the state of playing them and finding tweaks at the table as we played, or accidentally happening, realizing that we'd done something different as we played. I'm not in that state regarding those. I've deliberately jumped away and I'm kind of floating there. And yes, those influences are real. The question is, why those influences and not another? I don't know. And I don't care. Those are what came. Aesthetically, you and me are coming from the same place, Ibars, with, the readings that are cited and so forth. Linking it to a Grateful Dead song actually came a little bit later in the process as I'm playing, and who knows, are the Grateful Dead and Philip K. Dick a viable hybrid, or is that an Edwards abomination? Don't care. But these things are coming together for me. Now, all of this, of course, is in the context of reading, thinking, and teaching about religion as a human phenomenon, which is also discussed through those 4 games, as well as other things I've written. So that's all happening in my head. So what I'm thinking of is this process of aesthetic creation, that making a thing and having it be pretty is, we're engaged in it, and that takes on that role of entering into chaos. So it feels as though I'm going out there and finding some loopy shit and saying, okay, I'm going to do this. And you're in the danger of gimmickry at that point, certainly. But as the play and attempted play and the development went on, the question was whether this is viable toward that end. And that's what we discover and say, oh, we're onto something, as opposed to, why are we fucking around with arts and crafts when I'm playing a perfectly viable game here without it, right? There's only one way to find out. Hopefully that answers. Super freaking long. I know. I'm tired. But I hope it was worth thinking about, listening to. All thoughts welcome, of course. Last one. And let's see if it defeats me or I defeat it, or if we end our struggle in a phase of, mutual respect or some other metaphysical thing. So Pedro asks, what is it about Tunnels and Trolls 5th edition that you think makes it the best bona fide dungeon crawling game? Kind of happy to answer this, but I'm not sure how coherent it will be. I do think that the points that I've made previously in this Q&A are relevant, so try to keep aspects of those in mind. Where shall we start? First, let's just understand what we're talking about. Tunnels and Trolls is arguably in the very first wave of genuinely playable published role-playing games. If not the first, but perhaps the first. I have to look at the months or something. I don't really care. Procedurally, it's a wave. If in case you're interested, I actually think Empire of the Petal Throne counts. I don't think Dungeons and Dragons 1974 counts. But whatever it is a bunch of people did at the tables within 15 minutes, that certainly counts. All right, so in that phase is when Tunnels and Trolls appears. There's some amusing aspects of it appearing, but I guess you can look all that up and, consult Reddit or some shit if you want. But the essence is that it's published by a company called Flying Buffalo in Arizona. And the author is an enthusiastic wargamer and now role player, Ken St. Andre, who goes on to pump out a few other really interesting things in the next few years too, some of which aren't published or are available only later. Tunnels and Trolls, as you can see, the name is a deliberate spin, TNT instead of D&D. And boy, there's so many footnotes in there. I'm just trying to suppress them. And it says 5th edition in 79, so 4 years later is what I keep raving about. But as with many of these, not Dungeons and Dragons, but with many of these, the editions are best understood as drafts. We're actually seeing the game design in front of our eyes, and it's just expressed in publication terms. So if you look at Tunnels and Trolls 1st through 5th, what you're seeing is an enthusiastic play process and, the hasty scribbles of, fixes or amendations and amendments, and reconsiderations of things that really just crest. They really just coalesce in that so-called 5th edition. So I guess you could just say early Tunnels and Trolls, but think of that as just like the, hammer down there. Got it. So it's not the same as some other games where the editions represent alternates. 1st and 2nd edition of RuneQuest are the same. 1st edition, so-called, is really just a first printing. 2nd edition fixes typos and puts on an appendix. That's it. So calling that a different edition, it's like, no, it's a slightly better copy edited, version. A little bit more material. Edition. So lots of these games are, as I say, are like that. So Tunnels and Trolls, when I say 5th edition, I don't mean that there have been 5 versions. 5th edition is what we call, in my opinion, the kind of moment when Tunnels and Trolls kind of goes on the shelf and you say, there's my game.